this time. Hey guys, what's going on? I've been having technical difficulties for about 35 minutes. I guess I'll just get started, and if nobody joins, then I guess this will be a video that'll be up later tonight. So, first and foremost, I just want to get started. Um, I have made about 4 videos on this topic. So, my name is Aaron. I've dealt with grief and loss in my life. Uh, I started from a young age. I lost my twin brother when I was 4 years old, and I lost an uncle when I was in the 7th grade. I lost my grandpa in the 10th grade, and then when I was 21, I lost my mom, and then I lost my paternal grandmother in November of that year, and then I lost my maternal grandmother in that year. And then my grandfather on my paternal side passed away before I was even born. So I've dealt with a lot of loss in my life. I've lost cousins and friends, and uh, it's all been a complete challenge. But I do want to. The reason why I wanted to have this channel too is this is one of my sub niches, but I think it's an extremely valuable thing to be able to share. Uh, Especially since I think I was able to kind of take the things that I learned in my grief and loss, and I use them as motivators in my life, to kind of maximize and become the best version of myself. So I do kind of want to touch on those things and be able to help anybody and kind of start this discussion off. So, um, like I said, I'm an identical twin. Let me just make sure I have audio now. Okay, let's see. To my phone, let's see, does that work? All right, so now we got audio. All right, so now we got audio. All right, let me jump back in. So I kind of want to go through my life a little bit and kind of let you know where I came from as a person. So when I was younger, I had 2 parents that had mental illnesses. Honestly, they probably neither one of them probably should have been parents, but I'm a firm believer that everything happens for a reason, and we're all here for a reason, um, and that's a blessing. But when I really think about it, they probably shouldn't have been parents. So basically, when I was 3 years old, my mother and my father couldn't take care of us. So I got put in the foster care system, and unfortunately, um, it was a hard time, especially like as a kid. You kind of wonder what you did wrong and like why your family doesn't want you anymore. So when I turned 4 years old, we went to we had a pool in our backyard, and basically we were outside swimming, and my foster parents were paying attention, and my brother jumped in the pool, and he had no fear, and he unfortunately wasn't scared of anything. I was scared of everything, and he jumped in the pool. He couldn't swim, and the last thing I remember is him asking for me to grab something to push over to him so he could grab onto it, and he never grabbed onto it. And I don't really recall too much of it. all I really remember is him floating upside down in the water. And uh, I think at that age, like you don't really understand what you're seeing. I don't think as a 4 year old you're not really able to understand death. And I think that was like one of the biggest regrets I had was when uh, my brother my brother passed away and I didn't really understand it. And um, I didn't go to the funeral, and all I remember is just being alone. And I think at this time it was extremely hard from the standpoint is that I was in foster care, so like even the people that I did have around weren't really there for me the way I needed to be or way I needed. Because when you're a twin, like you have this special bond, the special connection that you can't really describe. And I made some other videos about this, but I had a lot of challenges post him passing away. I ended up going back with my dad, and my dad still wasn't really, probably shouldn't have had custody of me, but the court found that he was the best to take care of us or take care of me. Um, and my dad was never really mentally stable. Like I talk about in a lot of my videos. Um, my my job as a parent has been kind of being the parent I wish I would have had as a kid. And uh, that's kind of I discussed in my other videos. Um, but I think back and like I think about how life would have been different if my brother had been there. Like I said, when I was 4 years old, he passed away in June, and I started school in September, I believe. Which I think is too early for kids to be starting school. My son started when he was 5, and I think about him starting at 4, and I'm like, there's no way he would learn anything. Um, but I went to school and I was alone, and like I said, my dad was kind of not really there all the way, and I didn't really have that rearing that a boy needs from their father. So I wasn't really emotionally prepared for school. Uh, but I think about how things would have been different if my brother had been there. And like I was just remember being lonely and sad all the time. And nobody really explains to a kid how to deal with death and loss. And um, unfortunately, like it's hard to communicate. I mean, like I even think about with my son, like the first time he experienced death when he was 5 years old, and his great grandmother died, and he couldn't really understand. And like when my childhood dog died, we're like, well, he went to the farm and he's chasing all these animals, and like that was a way to kind of like explain the absence of the dog not being around anymore. But um, when his grandmother passed away, he was really sad. And I think if one of the things I do want to lean on my like kind of how I've gone through my grief and my loss is that um, I I'm a Christian. I'm non-denominational. I believe in God, and I have heavy faith. In my early years, I didn't really have that faith, and I think not having it kind of made things a lot harder for me. Uh, you know, kind of like now being at the age where I kind of understand. I understand things a lot more. I'm 40 years old now. Um, but back then, like you wonder why things happen the way they do, and you don't really know how to explain them. Um, so, well, I'm hoping somebody jumps in so we can I can have a chat and start going off instead of just me talking. But I guess this will replace a video that I would put out. My grief and bereavement videos haven't really had a lot of traction. Honestly, like my first video that I put out on YouTube was about being a twinless twin, because there's not really that many of us, and I think it's such a minute amount of people, and especially being an identical twin. I guess that's the kind of the direction I'll go back into. So again, my faith has kind of led me and directed me to where I am today. But again, with being a twinless twin, uh, it's a really weird and like surreal thing when I think about it, because like I watched my brother pass away and I watched him drown. That's how he passed away. He drowned in the pool. Um, and like the weirdest and most surreal part of it is that like we're identical twins. So like the last thing I really remember from him was him floating upside floating on his stomach in the pool and not breathing. And being an identical twin, it's the craziest part is like it's like watching yourself pass away, and that's what really like that's what really like makes it hard, is like you can literally see yourself pass away. And I don't really know how to express that emotion and how that felt. um, but I think losing my brother at such a young age, it really made growing up hard. And um, unfortunately, like I didn't have the siblings. Like I said, I was in foster care, and then I was with my dad, and my dad didn't really act like a father and kind of let me go off and kind of do my own thing at 4 and 5 years old. And unfortunately, at that time, I was very vulnerable, and some people took advantage of me. And I mean, that's a different story for a different day. But so I dealt with that loss for a long time, and I think I look back and I'm blessed that like I think being in the welfare system, I was able to kind of get help. And but therapy looks a lot different when you're a young kid rather than an adult. So like what I remember from the therapy part of it is that um, I would go to a therapy. I would have a therapist, and we would basically play. So I kind of looked forward to going to the therapist's office because they always had really cool toys. I talk a lot of my other videos of kind of growing up poor and growing up in the welfare system. Uh, so I didn't really have a lot of toys of my own when I was growing up. So going to the therapist and having toys to play with really allowed me to have fun and kind of enjoy being a kid for a little bit. And what I remember is like the therapist would say little things and kind of like work things out. But I never really had, I don't really remember any of those conversations. So, I went to school and I was kind of an outsider, and people made fun of me, and I was susceptible to bullying. Uh, I didn't have my brother to kind of take care of me. And again, like, just I remember just being lonely. Like, I think the worst part about it is when I really think about it is having your innocence stripped away before your life even really starts. I run through my head like all the different things that could happen, and um, like what I could have done differently, if I could have helped him, if I could have saved him. And like I couldn't. And sometimes I have dreams about it, and I really like I can't comprehend it. Like I had a dream the other night about him, and I was like, could I have done something differently? Could I have saved him? Could I have done something? And it's weird because you think about like how adolescents, how we grow and how we mature, and like we don't really have cognitive thinking before the age of 5. So like I can't even really go back in my mind to really like go through all the things that I could have done. Um, so again, like I talk about how I had an estranged relationship with my mother. My mother was always in and out of mental institutions, and she lived on psych wards and in group homes. And that's where my parents met, was in a group home. So I had animosity towards my mom, and because of her mental illnesses, when I was with her, uh, she would act kind of erratic. And when I was, I think, 8 years old or 9 years old, she told me that the doctors made a mistake and that I was really my brother. Uh, and as a kid, that's really rough and hard to hear. And like the worst part is that I didn't have either parent really to really raise me or like kind of teach me how to do things. So I was kind of self dependent for most of my early life. Thankfully, when I was 8 years old, my dad finally dated somebody, and I have a pretty awesome stepmom, and I'm pretty grateful for that. And like she gives me a lot of support nowadays. Um, but again, like all these factors kind of led to like stunted development, I would say. Uh, you know, I got made fun of, I got bullied. Um, I would see other twins and my heart would be broken because like I missed my brother. So that was my first experience with death and loss, and my next experience with it was when I was well, how old was I? I believe I was in eighth grade when my uncle passed away, and I never was really close with my uncle. He was kind of an oddball too. Kind of mental illness kind of ran through my family, and uh, he was kind of a hermit crab. And when he passed away, it's not like I really had a personal relationship with him. Like I knew of him. It was my mom's brother. I didn't really know him very well. So when he passed away, I just knew that a member of my family passed. So that one didn't really hit me. And then my maternal grandfather passed away, or my maternal grandfather passed away. I met him a few times, and he was an odd, wacky, oddball kind of guy. And um, I know he was a mechanic when I was younger, and I would go over to his house with my mom, and he would have like car parts in his refrigerator. So if that tells you the kind of people that they were, uh, and like he had blacked out windows because when he was younger, my grandmother, being an old Italian lady, painted his windows black so he couldn't see out them. So that was like my last dealing with death as I would say a school grade person. And then I think like the as being a adult, this next one is the one that really kind of like hurt me the most, and because I was able to understand it. So like I was saying, my relationship with my mother was kind of estranged, and I had a lot of animosity towards her, and I had a lot of anger. And I really wish things would have been different, but they weren't. So I came home from Army basic training. My Army career didn't work out the first time, and I came home. I wasn't really doing anything. Going to work, kind of working odds and ends jobs, didn't do anything. Like, um, so I finally got close to my mom again, and when I finally got close, I made amends with her. She started getting sick, and I went to the doctors with her, and they diagnosed her with cancer. And like they're like, she has like a year or two to live. And honestly, like that's the worst is like when they give you a time frame, when they start telling you like they're gonna pass away in a certain amount of time. Um, because like you literally start grieving before they even pass away. Um, and it's just my mom would like sit there and cry, and she would um like she would say like I'm not gonna be okay. And it's like I think your gut reaction whenever you're um like put in that situation, like your goal is to be able to hopefully like comfort them. But when a person's dying, like you can't really comfort them. Like what do you say? Um and I think like these next couple months is where which was the hardest part of the grieving process after my mom was like being a 21-year-old kid. There were still times where I made excuses of why I didn't go to see her. And so again, I got close with her around Christmas time of 2006. And in June and early 2007, I got close to her, and I would go visit her, and like we'd have conversations that we never had, and we got close. And one time she got sick. I think she got pneumonia or bronchitis, and she was taking chemotherapy, and the chemotherapy wasn't helping. So at that point, she stopped, and then she got sick, and they put her in hospice care. And I went to go see her in hospice care, and like at that point, the most recent memories was me coming to visit her. So when I'd go visit her in the hospital, she would try to pull out all of her IVs and all of the stuff that was connected to her. And as a kid, like seeing a lot of things that my mom did over the years, like it really affected me. And then I kind of pulled away there at the end. And I was playing softball, and I think my brother called me, and he said, "Mom's about to pass away. You need to get here." And I remember getting to the hospital, and like the moment I saw my mom not talking and not like reacting, I lost it. And I went over to the bed, and I laid on the bed with her, and I just cried, and I kept apologizing over and over again because I felt like a bad son. And um, my mom ended up passing away that night, and I was just heartbroken. Like the worst feeling. And I couldn't stop crying. I was hyperventilating. I passed out from crying. And that was the start of the grieving process. And I think what made the grieving process so hard from losing my mom is I think when you have regret, that is what really attacks you, and that's really what plagues you. The whole entire time I was always like, well, I should have been talking to her. I should have tried to make things better earlier on, and I didn't. And I'd lived with myself with that for a long time, and it took me a really long time to be able to finally get to a place where I was fine. I would hear certain songs on the radio. I would see certain movies. I would drive past certain things, and like I just I couldn't really work through it at that time. I kind of secluded myself. I shut down emotionally. I shut down kind of physically. I was working, doing nothing, odds and ends jobs. Um, so in that year, so my mom passed away in June, and in November, my paternal grandmother had Alzheimer's and dementia, and I would go visit her. And being a young 21-year-old, my grandma thought that I was my grandfather, and my grandfather passed away before I was born, so I never got to meet him. Uh, so again, like the hard parts with the end of life is that like when somebody's passing away and somebody's dying, like you don't really know how to address that. Especially being a young kid, I definitely didn't know. Um, and again, like I would go visit my mom, and she would try to take all the stuff out of our arms and try to get up, and so we could go do something like we had always done. Kind of like the same thing with my grandmother is that when I went to go visit my grandma, like she'd be like, she was thinking she thought I was my grandfather. Which I think it's really hard on a young person. Like, how do I deal with this? So she got sick. I got the news that she was passing away, so I went and said my final goodbyes to her. She passed away in November of 2007, and then 3 months later, my maternal grandmother, my mom's mom, she was at her nursing home, and one of the orderlies gave her food, and she ended up choking to death, which is a horrible way to die in itself. And so in that time frame, I lost my mom in June. I lost my grandmother in November, and then I lost my other grandmother in January of 2008. So in that 7 month time frame, I lost my mom and both grandmas, and that really hit me hard. And I think like the main purpose of my page is I kind of want to teach people about losing, like going through adversity and using the adversity and the challenges that you go through in life and using those as motivators to be able to move forward. So, um, like I said, like when my mom and my grandmothers passed away, I wasn't really doing anything with my life. Like I didn't really feel like I was doing well. And I was kind of ashamed. Like I'm like, I am wasting my life. And then like again, like going back to my brother, it's like my brother passed away. I'm not doing anything with my life. And this is like when I had to have like a serious, like kind of like self intervention and kind of have that relationship with God. And hold on, let me just typing a description in the chat here. So if anybody joins on, I can kind of lead them into what I'm talking about. My journey through life. Okay, so back at it. So again, they had all passed away, and I think it was probably about a year later in the fall of 2008, spring of 2009. Um, I wanted to do something in my life, so I think I was originally going to go to barber school, and I started looking into the process of that. And I think at some point I applied for community college, and by chance I got a letter from the college saying, "Hey, we saw you interview, or we saw you fill out the application for financial aid. Um, your first semester is going to be 100% paid for." So I was like, well, I better do something in my life. And up until that point, like, I had no motivation as a kid. Like, when I was in high school, I played football and basically I passed enough to be able to participate in the next week's game and to be able to play and like finish the season off, finish the year off, and be able to play the next season. Um, but I know I wouldn't consider myself a good student at any point. So I barely graduated, didn't get to walk the stage. Um, took summer school, and I graduated in August. This was in 2004, so um, barely passed high school. Went to the army, failed that. Again, was working odds and end jobs. I was dating different women and our girls at that point. And just life wasn't working out the way I wanted it to. Um, and when I filled out the application in college and I took the entrance exams, like they say that you reap what you sow. So when I went back to college and I took the test and I took English, I did pretty well in English, did pretty well in the other parts of it. Um, but I was always really bad at math, and I took the math portion of it and came back and I got like the worst possible score you could think of. So like when I signed up for my classes, um, community colleges have like remedial courses, and like there's remedial English, remedial. Thank God I was able to get a regular English class. But for math, like I had to take elementary math, and like the first week I learned whole numbers. So that just tells you how bad at math I was. So I had to take a bunch of classes that didn't have any credits. I mean, thankfully at this time I was getting full financial aid, so at least the classes were being paid for. So it's not like I was throwing out my money. Um, but I started taking classes. I really applied myself, and like I think that first semester I had like a 3.5, 3.75, and like I don't think I ever had that grade point average when I was in middle school or high school. Like I was always, people doubted me, and I had ADHD, and like the teachers were judgmental, and the assistant principal said I should drop out. And again, when you hear things like a certain amount of times and you keep hearing these things over and over again, you start to believe it. And that's one of the things I talk about with my relationship ending. you know there was a lot of things that were said about me during my relationship, and like I started to believe those things, and I really, I think once you start like kind of ruining your self image of yourself, it's pretty much all downhill from there. So once I started doing good in college, I kind of knew that it was something I could do because, like, when I first did it, it was kind of like a I guess an experiment. Like, I know I'm not going to do well. I'm going to flunk out like I did in high school, and uh, I really applied myself, and I started to do good, and I got motivated, and I think I was trying to get into dental hygiene, and I took the core classes, I took the gen eds, and I did well on those. Again, I was still working through the math, so I had to get that done. But I started doing the classes I needed to get those get the prerequisites done. And then like the second semester, I did well again, and I kept progressing. And I was like, maybe I'll try nursing, and I applied to some other community colleges in the area that had nursing programs. And unfortunately, I didn't get into any of those. And at that point, I was like, well, I try to be a dental hygienist, and maybe I should just try to be a dentist. I make this joke like this is why I wanted to be a dentist was when I was a kid. I've always, even now, I'm like I've always been obsessed with Christmas. I mean, as you see, I have Christmas lights above. Um, we'll say they're year long festive lights. Um, as you see, they have the stars for like Memorial Day and Fourth of July, and then I have the LED lights in the back to kind of make a nice ambiance in my house. But from Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, when Herbie the Elf decided he wanted to be a dentist, and I was like, well, if Herbie can be a dentist, then so can I. So um, I went to the University of Buffalo. I applied. It was the only college I applied for, and I got in. And I think this is one of the parts where I realized like where my past had kind of caught up to me is that like all those years of not doing well and doing horrible in college and kind of feeling like a loser, and teachers telling you you're not good enough, and having family members say, hey, you're not going to amount to anything, you're just not meant for this. um, it pushed me and it motivated me, but it also took away from the feeling of pride and joy of being able to accomplish those things. uh, you know I tell people all the time, like, even in this stage of my life, I still have imposter syndrome. So basically, I've accomplished pretty good things in my life. I have a good career now. I'm in the military. I enjoy being a dad, and like those are the things that are important to me. Um, but like I still feel like I don't belong, and even at work, like it still blows my mind that I am where I am because like with all the adversity and stuff I went through, the losses, my mom passing away, my brother passing away, being in foster care, like I shouldn't I shouldn't be where I am. And I think going through those things, I'm like, I don't belong here. So I have the feeling of being an imposter. So but again, I think failure and fear of failure is a tremendous motivator. And I think that the fear of failing is what pushed me to become the best student I could be. At no point was it easy. I always tell people like I had to try extremely hard to be average, and it's it's kind of a funny thing to say. Like when you're like, I'm working as hard as I can to be just the middle of the road. But I was always like a B A- student in college, which was again crazy to me. Um, but again, I got into the University of Buffalo, which is a highly accredited college and university, always ranks pretty high nationally. And so I felt like I was an imposter there. And, over and over again, I just wanted to make my family proud. And when I think about it, like, I think when my brother passed away, and then my mom passed away, and then my uncle and my grandfather and my grandmothers, and like they passed away. Like I feel like I have my half my family is up in heaven right now, and I think when you start thinking about things in that light, um, and especially when you have faith, like at this point, my faith was in its infancy period. Like I believed in God, I wanted to have a relationship with God, but I never really had the means of having organized religion. I was baptized Catholic, but I didn't go to church really. I went there on Easter and Christmas, but and then I had a man that was like a father to me. He brought me to a Baptist church, but I wasn't really a big fan of the Baptist church. So like at that point, I was always like, I don't want them to tell me they want their money. So I stayed away from organized religion, but I always believed in God. I always prayed, and I always like talked to my mom. I always talked to my brother, and I always talked to my grandparents. And I said, I just want you to be proud of me. I'm going to work as hard as I possibly can so that you not being here anymore has meaning. So, um, luckily, I started University of Buffalo in 2011. I finished out my associate's degree in 2013, and that was a proud moment of mine. I wasn't done with school though. I was still at UB, and I stayed there 2 more years. I almost flunked out, honestly. I dropped some classes that I wasn't doing well in, and that's when I decided I wasn't going to be a dentist. I started taking chemistry, and the first day classes, like you walk in, and like your prerequisites for like the medical stuff is like chemistry, calculus, physics, um, those kind of classes. So like I walk into the class, and it's a lecture hall, and it's like a lecture hall of like 400 seats, and like again, like not being a good high school student, it made it difficult to kind of uh, assimilate. So when I started to assimilate, I felt insecure about asking questions. And I think that was kind of not the best. Um, but, so I told myself I didn't belong there. I dropped down to like two classes, and I ended up going part time. And at that point, I was commuting back and forth, and it was a long commute. And I almost flunked out, put a leave of absence, and finished out my degree at the community college. When I finished my degree, went back to school. I did all right, but again, growing up on welfare, I didn't really have like the financial support system that a lot of people would have. So I've been working since I was 15 years old. So I was working my way through college, and with having about an hour and a half, 2 hour commute or 3 hour commute every day, it made pretty much very little time for me to be able to actually focus on my studies. I mean, I was commuting 9 hours a week. And when you're working full time and trying to do your studies and not get sleep and work multiple jobs, it makes it really hard to do well in your studies. So I didn't do well that semester. I think I got like C pluses. And I was like, well, I need to really hunker down and focus. So that summer I took some summer classes at the community college locally, and I got some credits, and I decided to move up to college, move on campus, have the whole campus experience, which honestly is like, I'm grateful I did that because, going to school was cool, and like being able to like wear the swag of the school was cool. But like finally actually being able to live on campus and participate in campus activities. I decided to work for the football team when I was there, and I was a student manager. And honestly, that was the most fun I've ever had in my life in a job. Um, So I finished out that year, enjoyed my life as a college student, enjoyed my job as student manager. So that spring I graduated, and I remember like when I walked across that stage and I got my final grades and I had my cap and gown, I walked to the center of the football field and I just looked up and I was like, I did it. Thank you. I did it. Like, I hope you're proud of me. And that that was an incredibly powerful moment, to look to the skies and look up and hope that like they're looking down on me and they're proud of me. Like, and I guess the one I guess losing my brother at such a young age, and then having my mom pass away. Um, at least my brother had his mom when he was up in heaven, and he had his grandparents, and he had his uncle, and he had his grandfather. So from that standpoint, I guess I'm grateful that he had him. Um, hold on one second. My son is texting me, and I want to say goodnight to him. So okay, I'm back. So I graduated college, and you know, I finally felt like I made something of myself, and um, at this time I was 29 years old. So my goal was always to finish college before I turned 30. So being able to get my college degree before I was 30 years old was a big thing. Because again, like I always had the imposter syndrome, and I always felt like I was a little behind everybody else. You know, the people I graduated with in high school, they all graduated in what was that? So I graduated high school in 2004. They would have graduated in 2008, 2009. Um, and I graduated in 2015. So I graduated like 6 years after everybody else graduated, 6, 7 years after. So that was pretty crazy. And I feel like I was always behind everybody. And again, that didn't really help with the imposter syndrome. Like, I thought it was kind of embarrassing being like an older student. I mean, thankfully, I've always looked pretty young. So I didn't feel like I was like super old based on like looking younger. But I definitely, when it came to like being around my peers, I felt like I was an imposter. Um, and life afterwards is pretty hard. And you know, trying to make something of myself. And I was working in the restaurant industry, and didn't really. I was working the same job I was at when my mother passed away, and I would say now I got like the college part out and like the motivation to finish and kind of use my family as my motivator in passing college and graduating. Um, I guess some bright spots was when my mom passed away and the people I worked with. Again, I was 19 years old, or how old was I? I was 21 years old when my mom passed away. So I was young. I worked in the service industry. I was a waiter. I was a bartender, and the people I worked with were around the same age as me. And I was grateful for the way they treated me. You know, um, they let me call off, and they all pitched in money and gave me an envelope full of money. People picked up my shifts so I could have off and grieve. Um, so I think when you have family members that pass away, especially when it's like an abundance of them, like I lost, like you kind of feel like everything you do is under a microscope, and like I feel like you feel like you always have to prove something, um, and so I feel like there's always this pressure to feel like you have to be the best at everything, and you kind of feel like you have this weight that you're carrying because again, like my brother lost his life My mom lost her life. My grandparents lost their life, so they no longer had a life here to uh to have. So I kind of always had this guilty feeling that I had to do the absolute best and live my life to its fullest to honor them. And honestly, that was a huge burden. And like I'm grateful for that. And I kind of feel like I'm always under a lens because like I had to like if I didn't amount to anything, then I failed them. And you don't want to feel like you failed your family. Uh, so I was at work and it's kind of going into my faith. It's kind of weird how things align themselves and like one point starts and like in the moment you don't think about this moment right here. Um, and there's multiple different directions you could go, and God just has a mysterious mystery way of putting us exactly where we need to be. So I started working at my restaurant. I finished college. I got my degree in communication and public relations. Couldn't find a job. Tried to get a job as a football coach at universities. Didn't get hired. Stuck with what I knew, and I decided to be a restaurant manager. I was working for Ruby Tuesday at the time, and one day I was doing my opening shifts, and my I got an email from corporate saying that they were closing a bunch of stores around the country, and I got nervous. And I'm like, well, I worked this hard, and now it's all about to be taken away from me. And I was like, I'm going to come in. There's going to be a letter on the door because in the food industry, they don't give you notice that the restaurants are going to close. They just put a note on the door. It says, "Thank you for your service and good luck in life." And they don't really give you a severance. So started looking around for different jobs, and I think I almost got a job at Applebee's as a manager, and I ended up getting hired at Longhorn Steakhouse. And again, it's so weird how things happen. And I met this girl and I fell in love, and I wanted to be with her so badly, and I couldn't be with her because you're not allowed to date your employees. Uh, so there was one day, and I don't know if it was like the universe speaking, but like I worked Mother's Day because I didn't have my mom. Obviously, I celebrate my stepmom because she's been a mother to me. But my mom passed away, and I worked so other people could have off and spend time with their mothers. And that night, I started talking to an army recruiter again, and I got back in the army, and I got back into the service. Went in, decided that the job wasn't for me. I went in and quit. Joined the army, went to reserves, and then that girl I met at the restaurant, she ended up being the woman that would be my son's mother. So, we had a miscarriage early on in our relationship. Um, and this is part of the grieving process too. Like, we think of like this type of group is different because I mean the one was like, I lost my mom, lost my brother. Like these were physical people that were gone. This was a soul that was gone. This was a connection that was severed, and like you could feel that. Um, so the first time I was told I was going to be a father, I always wanted to be a dad from like when I was like a young kid, and I always wanted to break those generational chains of like the mental health illnesses and all that. And when I found out I was going to be a dad, I really bought in, and I think the for a person that really wants to be a parent, when they realize that this is an opportunity and that it's possible, it's actually going to happen. For myself, like I found out I was going to be a dad, and I went and bought a card, and I was so excited about this. And I went and I um I bought a card for my dad and stepmom, and I was like, "You're going to be grandparents." So it was exciting. And then I told family members and got excited. And I remember I was leaving for basic training in September, October timeframe. And, um, all I wanted to do before I left for basic training was to hear a heartbeat. I'm like, that's all. I'm like, I want to hear a heartbeat. Like, I want to know my child's alive. I want to hear his heartbeat. I want to hear life. I want to eventually see the ultrasound. But first and foremost, I want to hear him. I want to hear his heartbeat. And she went to the doctor. She started bleeding. And um, when they went to listen, there was no heartbeat. Um, and nobody really prepares you for that moment. Um, when you're gonna be a father, the the memories aren't of the past. The memories are like you have memories of what can be and what will be. And you think about having a daughter, and the things that play in your head is um, having tea parties, having dress up, playing dolls. You think about your son, and you think about playing catch, throwing a ball around, wrestling, doing all that stuff. And when I found out there wasn't a heartbeat, my heart just broke. Like, I think when you think about the loss of what could be, like, that's devastating. Because I think when I think about all the death and loss I dealt with, it really it really made it hard for me. And when I found out I was going to be a dad, it was an opportunity from all the loss and all the death that there was finally going to be some life. And I wanted to celebrate that more than anything. But then I got the news about the miscarriage, and at that point, my ex and I weren't getting along very well, and the miscarriage kind of brought us together. And so obviously, I proposed to her when she got pregnant, and I tried to do the right thing, try to be a good dad, be a husband, try to build that life. And I was leaving for basic training. So I left for basic training, and I went around Christmas time. And for the army at Christmas time, we come home on what they call victory block leave. So I come home from basic training, and I get the awesome uh, reception at the airport, welcome me home for Christmas. And we went out to eat, and all I was craving was a juicy hamburger, a cheeseburger. So I went to the cheeseburger place. We ordered food, and my son's mother, my ex fiance, um, she wasn't eating anything. And I'm like, this is weird. I was like, she loves onion rings, she loves French fries, she loves hamburgers, and she didn't eat any of it. So after that, after we had our meal, we went back to her apartment, and I sit down on the couch. And she walks over with a little bag, and it has a Captain America ornament inside of it. And it has an ultrasound. And like when I saw the ultrasound, I was the most confused I think I've ever been in my entire life, because before I left for basic training, for the miscarriage that we had, all I wanted to do was hear the heartbeat. All I wanted to do was see the ultrasound. And then there was this ultrasound in front of me, and like my brain could not comprehend what I was looking at. And she's like, "Why don't you look happy?" And I'm like, "Honestly, because I didn't even think this was possible." So like I'm looking at this ultrasound picture of a baby, and it says baby and then my last name. And like in that moment, I was so grateful, and I couldn't even put into words what I was feeling, because having that loss, and it's not talked about a lot. And I do have a video about it, about going through that loss. And like, I just want to emphasize, if you're somebody that's gone through that, people will try to tell you that you shouldn't feel the way you do because it wasn't really a life yet. Um, but again, I think it's the idea of what will be or what can be is what really causes you to grieve and feel bereavement from that situation. Um, so I found I was going to be a dad, and I go back to basic training. I graduate, go to AIT. Me and my ex still had a rough relationship post all this. It didn't make things better, even though you think it might. But if you don't have a strong foundation in a relationship, when things get rough, anything will knock over the foundation of it. So I didn't, I wasn't ready for becoming a parent. Let's just say that, from a relationship standpoint. And then, like, the day I met my son was probably the most beautiful day of my life. And like, when I first saw my son, I didn't think I could ever love anything more than I love my son. Like, you think you love your parents, you think you love your siblings, you think you love your significant other, your husband, your wife. But the moment you lay eyes on your child for the first time, it's surreal. Like, I just met this person and I love them more than I've loved anything in my entire life. But so after that, we went home. I started working almost immediately, and I spent time with him. And this is the part I really wanted to start emphasizing. So I lost my brother when he was 4 years old, and I carried that PTSD with me for the rest of my life. You know, I remember after I lost my brother, I was in the hospital, and the cop that showed up to the scene, he came to the hospital, and he kneeled down and he gave me a hug and he gave me a toy, and that lasted with me for the rest of my life. And when my son was born, I lost him at 4 years old. So when my son was born, like, I knew how much I loved him, my son, and all I could think of is I pray to God I don't lose him. And I think when you have that in the back of your mind, that, like, death is possible, you fear it's going to happen everywhere. And I kind of feel like it made a lot of things really difficult for me. So, like, when I was with my son, like, we'd go somewhere and I'd be terrified he was gonna get hit by a car, or I'd be terrified that he was gonna get kidnapped, or we would go to, like, a parking garage and I was scared, like, he was gonna go over the edge, or something like that, and something would happen to him. So, like, I was so overly diligent when it came to, like, teaching my son safety. So, like, I taught him, like, stranger danger. I made sure he knew what would happen. I taught him road safety. I told him, like, you don't go out on the road, you don't do this, you look both ways, you don't just take the signs. Um, and I told him basically, like, you don't ever go out in the street unless you're holding mom or dad's hands. Um, so, like, this was something I carried with me for a long time, and the PTSD is a real thing, and it can be truly hampering to the point where sometimes, like, you can't even move, you can't breathe. Uh, I mean, just talking about right now is giving me kind of stress and anxiety. As you can see, my body's kind of tensing up. But, like, that first 4 years was so difficult. Like, my brother died when he was 4 years old, and, like, all I could think of was the beginning of his life is like, please don't let something happen to my son. And it's weird. Like, when he turned 5, that was like, that milestone was, it changed things significantly for me. Like, And this is the part I kind of want to emphasize too when it comes to grief and loss, is that I think that when we go through losing somebody, we avoid the things and the triggers that bring sadness and sorrow to us. We we kind of eject ourselves from the situations that will cause us to remember. And honestly, I think that was probably the worst thing that I could possibly do, because the problem when you do that is that when you eventually do become near that stimulus, like it's so overwhelming that like you don't know how to operate. You don't know how to get yourself out of that. And um yeah, it was a big milestone hitting 5, because it allowed me to breathe for the first time in a long time. Um, it's kind of sad when you think that way and you're trying to avoid things, and like constantly you just have stress in the back of your mind thinking the worst could possibly happen. So I mean, I was grateful when he finally turned 5 and I could kind of like put that behind me. And I guess there's like the one thing I wish I could have had with me earlier when it came to like when I lost my mom, is that like everywhere I went, there was triggers. And I live with regret. And I look back and I was like, well, if I would have done this differently, what if I would have said this differently, if I would have made an effort. And honestly, like when I look back, like I was a kid. Like I think that's the hard part when I think about it, is like I put all this pressure on myself. And I think the one like I don't want to say positive, but like when somebody passes away, you only think about the good times. Like there was a lot of good times with my mom, but there was also tons of bad times, and like times that like made me feel I wasn't worthy of anything. And like we forget about those times when they pass away, and we only think about the good things. And um, I think the living with the regret part of it made it hard to move on and move forward with my life at that point. Um, and when I finally got external things to put my time and energy in, that allowed me to use the, their deaths and their sorrow as a motivation and like a sense of purpose. Like it gave me purpose to do it. But there was also negative things that I did during this time that I wish I would have done differently. Like I would put myself in situations that I would put all my heart into those things. Like so I'm from like the Buffalo area. So when my mom passed away, I got season tickets to the Buffalo Bills. And for those of you who know, the Bills sucked for a very long time. Like the last couple of years has been amazing. Like since my son was born, they've been good. But up until that point, like I bought season tickets and I kind of use that as my escape. But the problem that when you do those escape things, um, when the things you put your escape in don't work out the way you want them, it almost you feel the things like the downward spiral is double. Like I'm like, well, if the Bills are doing good, then I can be okay and I can be happy about something. But then like when the Bills lose and they suck, it's like, well, I'm dealing with this grief and I'm dealing and now like they suck. So now I don't have that dopamine to kind of make things feel a little better. And this is like one of the things I emphasize now too is like therapy. Uh, I know it's scary to think about for some people, and they don't want to admit that there's something wrong with themselves. But I think we need therapy and we need people to talk to and we need religious leaders to talk to. And honestly, like talking to a talking to religious leaders help, but talking to a therapist and somebody knows how to give you the skills that you need so that when you're having those panic attacks and you're having those PTSD moments, and especially if you lost somebody in a traumatic way the way I did, um, those moments kind of replay themselves over and over and over and over again. And if you don't work through them, they will debilitate you in ways that you can't even explain. Like there were so many times I had panic attacks and I couldn't breathe and I couldn't move, and like where I was just freaking out, and it wasn't healthy. And um, I try to be grateful for the things in my life, and I try to have this mindset of gratitude in my life. And um, so I started going to therapy after my breakup, and I started finally working through all those things. In the past, I'd gone to therapy to address again. So here's the problem: like when it comes to trying to replace things with sorrow. So like I lost all those people, and I looked to other people to kind of fill that void of what I was missing. And I put all my effort and I put my happiness and my self-worth in somebody else. And then when that didn't work out, I felt lost again. And then I was carrying this weight of dealing with the grief and loss of those people. And then I was carrying the weight of the end of the relationship. And the problem was that when I was going to therapy in the years prior to this, that the only thing I really talked about in those therapy sessions was my relationship and trying to fix it and trying to get back into the relationship. And honestly, like I'm grateful for therapy and stuff like that, but when you're not really honest with yourself and you're not putting yourself in those situations to be able to help yourself, you're only hurting yourself. So like talked about the relationship didn't work out and I was back to being myself again. And I was like, well, I'm fine now. And um after my final breakup, uh, I started being a dad only, and my focus was being on a father and not being in a relationship. And I think once I got to that mindset and I was able to finally go to therapy after that, I was finally able to address the situations and the feelings that I had towards all these things. And I'm truly grateful for that part of it because, I was always trying to fix the thing that was covering up the pain, and I was having pain from the cover up and not ever getting to the core and the root of the problem, which was the grief and loss. So again, like once I was able to finally talk to a therapist and kind of walk through being the PTSD and kind of discussing those panic attacks I had as a dad, where I was thinking about like the same stuff that happened as my brother. And again, like what made it the hardest with my brother coming back to like where my story started was I'm an identical twin. When my brother died, it was like watching myself die. My son looks a lot like me. So in turn, he looks a lot like my brother. And there's some moments that like my son will make a certain face or a certain sound or he'll do a certain thing and it reminds me so much of my brother because again, my son has a lot of the personality traits that I do, but like I can see a lot of the things that my brother was in him. And I do think that God works in mysterious ways, and I do think that parts of our loved ones and our siblings they carry on with us beyond the grave and beyond heaven. But now that like I was able to go to therapy and kind of work through those things, when excuse me, um, when I was able to finally address the issues that I actually had, I was able to appreciate those moments where I would see him in them. And I'm like, it made me feel warm inside, and it made me like feel that connection. I'm like, that's my brother. That's exactly what he would do. That's exactly what he would say. And my son's 7 now. Um, and again, like I think about my faith, and I think what makes it manageable. I've started to lose people as I get older. I've lost friends, people I graduated high school with. Um, at this point, multiple ones now, and that's a weird thing is when you're getting to the age where people are dying of natural causes. I'm 40 years old now, so people that are dying, it's still pretty young for them. I lost my first buddy I played football with when I was 29. He was 29 and he left his son behind. Um, and I think going through the things I went through, I'm more sensitive and I'm more empathetic towards people that lose people. So, like, especially when it comes to things with children, whether it's a child losing their parents or a child being taken too early, those type of things really affect me emotionally. And I think they kind of bring me back to those feelings and those emotions. Um, you know, I think one of the reasons why I created this channel and one of the subsets of the niches that I talk about is bereavement and loss and kind of going through those things, because I kind of want to be a resource for those who have lost people. Because when you lose somebody, you kind of lose part of yourself, at least the part that they contributed to who you are as a person. Um, so I want to be able to help people, and I'll be honest, like it's hard discussing loss, especially when it comes to like siblings or like your mother and stuff like that. And losing them so young, it made relationships hard. And I think I really wanted to feel better, and I really wanted like somebody to love me and like provide that missing part. And I think when I was younger, a lot of my relationships failed because I put too much pressure on the person I was with to kind of understand like what I was feeling. And the problem is that when you're younger and you start talking to people and you start telling them about your life, like people go from being empathetic to being sympathetic. And once people are sympathetic towards you, they no longer look at you as an equal. They look at you as somebody they feel sorry for, and um, their mindset completely changes. So that made a lot of relationships really hard because when things would start to go wrong, they would blame those things and be like, "You never worked through these. You never took these things on head on. Like you're messed up." Um, so one of the things I've learned as I've gotten older is to be a little less forthcoming when it comes to discussing bereavement and loss, which seems weird because I'm on the internet right now talking to people about my losses. But my goal is to, I mean, the people I don't give out my YouTube channel to people I know. And for that reason alone is like my goal is to be able to help other people. And if you can see my real world experiences and you can see the things that I've done, and still become pretty successful, like I want you guys to know that you can do the same. Um, so I guess steps moving forward. I guess we'll kind of conclude this uh this stream. I'm kind of disappointed because I originally started this stream and I had scheduled, and when I logged on, there was 30 people, and throughout this entire stream, nobody else has come back. So this just turns into a video. Uh, so, but I do want to say Get help if you need it. Talk to a religious leader, get therapy, talk to a therapist. You could talk to your friends to a certain point, but again, the biggest problem with that is that people become sympathetic and not empathetic for you. Um, Again, they look at you in a different light. They talk differently around you. Um, and here's like, so here's some. This is the part where I'll talk about things that kind of help me through this process. So in one of my videos, being an identical twin, dealing with twin loss, and that component of it. A couple years ago, I was watching the 2010 movie Hereafter with Matt Damon. It was produced by Clint Eastwood. And I watched this movie, and one of the here's spoiler. So if you haven't seen it, turn it off right now or turn the volume down. But in this movie, this little boy, he's out with his brother, and his brother ends up getting hit by a car, and his brother dies, and the other brother basically shuts down, and he becomes a shell of himself. And throughout the duration of this movie, he's just trying to reconnect with his brother. So he goes like these seances, and he goes to like these spiritual leaders, and he just wants to talk to his brother, and he goes to a tarot card, and he goes like these people that like say they can talk to those beyond. And sorry about that. So then he comes across Matt Damon's character, who is able to talk to the afterlife, and um this little boy just wants to talk to him because he wants the opportunity to talk to his brother again. And at the end, he gets to speak to Matt Damon, and Matt Damon does like the connection to be able to talk to his brother. And Matt Damon's character is able to feel what his brother is saying, and he feels him in the room, and like he says stuff that only his brother would know. And basically, like the one brother never wore a hat, and when his brother died, he started wearing his brother's hat. And like there was all these times where the the surviving brother would have been in a situation where he could have had his life taken, and the brother's spirit kind of pushed and intervened. As I'm getting goosebumps like thinking about this, um, because like this is stuff that helped me get through. Um, but getting to that point where like Matt Damon, like he's talking to his character, and like Matt Damon's like talking to the deceased brother, and like the brother's like, take off the hat, it's not your hat, you need to move on, you need to live your life. And watching that, I think I was in 2010 or 2011 I saw that, so I would have been 20, 25, 26. So that was like the first time I really felt like closure, and like it made me feel at peace within my heart, like to able to actually visually see it really like it really connected with me. um it really it gave me a whole new perspective. So like when I talk to people and I talk about loss, that's always the way I go. And at this point in my life, like it's still hard talking about being a twin because again, like I don't want people to feel sorry for me. Like I feel like I've gotten pretty far in life, and I've done a lot of those things with motivation with those people. But like when I talk about them, like instantly you see people's faces just like change, and like they talk to you differently, they act differently around you because they don't want to offend you. So like especially being a brother, like a twin brother, like you never know how to tell people that because as soon as you tell them, their hearts instantly drop, their faces instantly drop, and like they just act different. Like they don't want to, but they do. And then like you tell them you lost your mom, and then like, oh, I'm sorry, and then like they won't like like people won't make like mama jokes and stuff like that. It's like I'm not offended by it. Like I think in the years closer to when it actually happened, like those type of things were triggers to me. But I think as you go through life and you start to like you do the things necessary to get into a good mental state, I think things change for you. Um, so again, that movie helped me a lot, and using the ones who passed before me as motivation helped me move forward and gave me purpose in life. And I'm still at that point. I get sad because my mom didn't even know I went to college. My mom, I'm one of 8 siblings. I'm the only one that didn't. She didn't get to see get married. She didn't know my son came to be. Like, obviously, I have a different look on life now. Like, I walk by faith, and I believe that if we believe in Jesus and we believe in God, that we're all entitled to the promise and we will see our loved ones again. So I think when I'm dealt with death at this point in my life, I look at things a little differently because I think in the past I was more secular and I looked more at the world as it is rather than the spiritual world that it is. So like now, like I'm like, well, this person's passing away, but in the grand scheme of things, this time that we're here on Earth is such a short blip. And in heaven, like that's probably I think about the time being like such a short period of time. Like my mom probably got there right after my brother did, and like vice versa. And like time just I think works differently up there. So I don't think we're ever fully alone. And like I feel like when our loved ones pass, that they truly go to a better place, and there's no more pain, there's no more hurt, uh, there's no more trouble breathing, there's no more pain. Like all that stuff goes away, and we hurt here on Earth because we hurt because of what those people meant to us and what those people made within us. I think that's why we hurt so bad. And that's why we grieve, is because this piece of us that was there is no longer there. So, again, when somebody passes away, use them as motivation in your life. Have them allow you for purpose, and don't put so much pressure on yourself to feel like you constantly have to live up to a certain thing. Like they still love you and they're still watching down on you. And I definitely think there's times in my life where my brother has been watching over me and he's kept me alive in situations that I can't even like fathom. But I kind of want to wrap this up. I was kind of hoping this was going to be a discussion instead of just me kind of blurting on. But where I stand now is I want to be able to help people. So if you watch this stream afterwards, after I upload it, um, I appreciate you watching. If you have questions, if you lost somebody, if you want to drop their names down in the comments, if you want to ask questions about how I address certain situations and certain scenarios, please drop comments. I want to be able to help you guys, and I want to be able to help at least one more person. I haven't gotten very many views on my grief and loss, and it's probably because I tell dad jokes every day and I give dad advice, and like people don't want to go to depressing stuff. So I guess I understand that part. But if you guys found this to be helpful, please like this video. Please share, please subscribe. There's gonna be more stuff coming up. Hopefully we can have discussions next week. Hopefully I can get the audio to actually work next week and we can actually start a live stream and have it be an actual conversation instead of just me talking. But if you watch this, I appreciate you watching. Again, ask any questions you want. Please like, please share, please subscribe. May God bless you and your families, and thank you for watching.